I'm Dr. Elias Thorne, and I've been tracking the Northern River Pride for nearly 15 years. That lioness lying in the dust, she is Kali. She is the matriarch, the genetic anchor of this entire lineage. And she is in serious trouble. The smell hits you first. It is not the scent of a natural death, nor the metallic tang of a territorial fight. It is chemical, acrid, artificial. Her body was still warm, but the rigor was already setting in. Her muscles locked in the final, agonizing convulsions of a nervous system under siege. There was no blood. No claw marks on her spine. No puncture wounds on her throat. Just the telltale purple granules scattered near her muzzle and the frothing saliva that had pooled in the dirt. It was Carbofuran, an agricultural pesticide intended for insects, weaponized here to clear the savanna of its apex predators. It shuts down the respiratory system within minutes. Kali had drowned in the open air. But as I looked at her swollen teats, the tragedy compounded into a crisis. Kali was lactating. She had 2 cubs, roughly 14 weeks old, hidden somewhere in the dense thickets of the drainage line. At this age, they are entirely dependent on her milk and her protection. They cannot hunt. They cannot defend themselves. Without her, they are simply calories waiting to be consumed by the scavenger guild. We scanned the horizon. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long, bruising shadows across the plains. The poison that killed Kali works fast, which meant she hadn't traveled far from where she ingested it, but the cubs would have been left behind in a creche site while she went to drink. They were out there, hidden in the camouflaged silence of the bush, waiting for a mother who was never coming back. And we weren't the only ones looking. A clan of spotted hyenas had been trailing the pride for days, testing their defenses. They would smell the death on the wind before nightfall. If they found the cubs before we did, there would be no rescue. There would only be silence. We had a choice to make, and the sun was already failing us. Nightfall changes the rules. In the Mara ecosystem, the transition from dusk to dark is not a gradual fade. It is a curtain drop. The visual dominance of the lion yields to the olfactory supremacy of the spotted hyena, Crocuta crocuta. While lions rely on low-light vision, hyenas navigate a 3-dimensional map of scent trails that crisscross the savanna floor. We were now operating in their domain, blinded by the darkness, reliant on the narrow, greenish throw of our thermal imaging scopes. We call this the golden hour of risk, the 6 minutes after sunset when temperature inversions trap scents close to the ground. If Cowley's milk had dried on the cub's fur, or if they had defecated in fear, that scent would act as a beacon. I drove the Land Rover slowly, keeping the RPMs low to minimize vibration. Beside me, the rangers scanned the drainage lines with red-filtered spotlights. White light disturbs the retina, blinding animals and destroying our own night vision. Red light allows us to observe without altering the behavioral landscape. The tracker on the hood signaled a stop. Stop! He pointed left, toward a dense thicket of Euclea divinorum. Through the thermal monocular, the bush was a chaotic mess of cool blues and purples. But deep inside the thorny architecture, two small, pulsating orbs of white-hot heat glowed against the background radiation. They were alive. But they were not alone. From the darkness behind us came a sound that chills the blood of every primate on the continent, the low, whooping call of a hyena scout. It started as a deep, resonant groan and ascended into a manic, oscillating pitch. This wasn't a social call. It was a rally cry. The scout had found the scent trail. In ethology, we stud the concept of competitive exclusion, where two species compete for the same resource until one is eliminated. To the hyenas, these cubs were not tragic orphans. They were simply future competition that could be removed while weak. It is a brutal, necessary logic that keeps the predator hierarchy in check. But tonight, we were interfering with that logic. We were about to break the prime directive of observation to prevent a genetic dead end for the Northern River Pride. The hyenas were closing in. We could see their heat signatures now. 4, maybe 5 shapes moving with that distinctive, loping gait. They were flanking the thicket, their noses high, testing the air. The cubs, sensing the threat, had engaged a survival mechanism known as crypsis. They had gone completely immobile, pressing their bellies into the dirt to minimize their silhouette and suppress their scent. It is a behavior hardwired into them over 1 million years of evolution. But against a pack of hyenas this close, it was a failing strategy. We had seconds, not minutes. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the rustle of dry grass as the hyenas tightened the noose. We couldn't dart the cubs, they were too small, and the dosage calculation under this stress was a recipe for cardiac arrest. This had to be a physical extraction. A grab. A grab. Fear is a variable we cannot control. But panic is a variable we must suppress. I signal the Rangers. Two men, armed with heavy canvas nets and thick leather gauntlets, slipped out of the vehicle. I stood on the running board, a high-powered torch in one hand and a flare gun in the other, our only deterrent if the hyenas decided to charge. The air was thick with tension, a palpable static charge that made the hair on my arms stand up.
Go! Oh.
The command was a whisper, but the movement was explosive. The Rangers sprinted into the thorns. The hyenas, startled by the sudden aggression of the humans, scattered momentarily, their giggles turning into sharp barks of confusion. The first ranger dove into the bush. A cub screamed, a high-pitched, rasping distress call that pierced the night. It triggered an immediate reaction from the hyenas. They spun around, their confusion replaced by predatory drive. They knew the prey was vulnerable. They charged. I didn't hesitate. I fired the flare gun into the air, the magnesium burst bathing the savannah in a blinding, unnatural white light. The sudden flashbang effect shattered the hyenas' coordination. They skidded to a halt, blinded and disoriented. We had that window! The rangers emerged for the thorns, clutching two writhing, biting bundles of fur. The cubs were fighting for their lives, terrified, sinking needle-sharp milk teeth into the leather gloves. These were not cuddly domestic cats. They were wild predators in miniature, fueled by adrenaline and terror. This is the paradox of rescue. To save them, we must first become their worst nightmare. We threw them into the back of the Land Cruiser and slammed the heavy steel doors. The hyenas, recovering their senses, rushed the vehicle, snapping at the tires, their jaws powerful enough to crush bone. The engine roared to life, and we tore away from the kill zone, the suspension groaning as we hit the ruts of the track at speed. We were clear. In the back seat, the chaos subsided into a heavy, panting silence. The cubs were huddled together in the corner of the crate, eyes wide, hissing at the darkness. They were traumatized, exhausted, and orphaned. But as I looked at the thermal readout one last time, what watching the heat signatures of the hyenas fade into the distance, I knew the scientific reality. Tonight, the timeline of the Pride did not end. We had intervened. We had altered the natural order. But as the adrenaline faded, leaving my hands shaking on the steering wheel, the weight of what came next began to settle. Saving them from the hyenas was the easy part. keeping them alive without a mother, in a world that required them to be lethal hunters, was a challenge that biology had not prepared them for. The adrenaline crashes hard. Back at the field station, the chaotic energy of the rescue dissolved into the clinical quiet of the holding boma. Under the harsh glow of the halogen work lights, the cubs looked smaller than they had in the bush. Without the darkness to hide in, they were just frightened biological refugees, shivering against the concrete floor. I prepared a rehydration solution, my hands smelling of diesel and latex, listening to their shallow, rapid breathing. We call this stabilization, but it feels more like damage control. While the vet team administered electrolytes, I walked back to the truck to retrieve the samples taken from Callie's body. This is the grim accounting of conservation. We had saved 2 lives tonight, but we had lost a matriarch. And in the complex sociobiology of a lion pride, a matriarch is not merely a leader. She held the map of the waterholes during drought, the hunting strategies for buffalo, the boundaries of the territory. That knowledge died with her. The toxicology report would later confirm our fears. Carbofuran. It is a granular pesticide, cheap and easily accessible, often used by pastoralists in retaliation for livestock predation. But the tragedy of poison is not just its lethality. It is its indiscriminacy. Callie was the primary target. But the vultures that fed on her carcass, the jackals that would have scavenged the scraps, and the insects that cleaned the bone, they are all part of a cascading necrosis. It is a chemical wildfire. By removing the apex predator, the poison destabilizes the trophic cascade. Without lions to control herbivore density, overgrazing increases. Without vultures to clean carcasses, disease vectors like anthrax proliferate. The person who laid that poison didn't just kill a lion, they wounded the entire immune system of the savanna. These cubs are the survivors of a war they don't even know they are fighting. They were safe now, secured within the sanctuary's nursery. They would be raised by surrogate humans in ghillie suits to prevent habituation, with the distant hope of rewilding them when they reached sub-adulthood. But they would never walk the path Callie had intended for them. They would never learn the specific dialect of the Northern River Pride. We bought them time. As I turned off the lights in the boma, leaving them to a restless sleep, I looked out over the perimeter fence. Pride was out there, 1 member short, facing a new day in a landscape that is becoming increasingly hostile. The rescue was a victory, yes, but it was a battle, one in a war we are slowly losing. Callie's story ended in the dust. But for her cubs, and for the Northern River Pride, the story is still being written. Tonight's rescue was only possible because we had the fuel to drive the truck, the thermal optics to see in the dark, and the veterinary supplies to stabilize the survivors. This is the unglamorous, expensive reality of frontline conservation. Poison is silent, but our response cannot be. We are fighting to ban these toxins and patrol these critical zones. If you want to stand with the rangers who risk their lives in the dark, or if you want to read the full autopsy report and my personal field notes from this operation, click the link below to join our Patreon. Your support keeps the engines running. Join the pride. Become the mission.